Hi Year 1 and welcome back to our lesson where our focus has been on the book The Street Beneath Our Feet. So we're carrying on with learning about soil. So today we're going to think about classifying soil by its colour and by its texture. Did you know, Miss McGee, that you can tell a lot about soil just by looking at its colour?
No, I did not know that, Mrs. Reed.
Well, black or dark brown soil usually is good for growing plants easily and it is very fertile.
If the soil is plain brown or yellow, this soil has a low level of nutrients and makes it more difficult to grow plants. It is not very fertile and compost would need to be added to make it more fertile.
If the soil is red, the colour comes from iron, which can make the soil look like a reddish rusty colour. The soil has been exposed to the weather for a long time and will drain water well. To help plants grow, this soil must have nutrients added to it. So Year 1, there were some words in there that you may not understand the meaning of. And in your last lesson, we asked you to make a glossary of words, and some of those words should be in your glossary. So we'd like you to just remind yourself of the meanings of those words.
Now, Mrs. Reed has already said that you can classify soil by colour, but you can also classify soil by its texture. Now, soil texture means how coarse or how fine a soil is. This means finding out how much sand, silt and clay it contains. You can find out soil texture by using the ribboning technique, and that is what we are going to be using today in our experiment.
Okay, so Year 1, we have been out and we have collected 3 samples. So we've got sample 1 here, which we collected from the Key Stage 1 garden. We've got sample 2, which we collected from the Year 1 entrance. And we've got sample 3, which we collected from the nursery. So all of our samples were taken from different areas around the school. And what we did was we had a small handful and we put it into a little pot.
Now you are going to fill out the attached PDF grid for each sample, and on that grid you need to tell us what colour the soil is, the texture, so how it feels, and the sound. And we are going to fill this out as we complete the ribbon experiment. Now, Mrs. Reed, if I fill in the grid, do you want to test sample 1?
Right, okay, so sample 1. So I'm taking sample 1. My sample 1 is quite wet, so I'm not going to add any extra water to my sample 1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll my soil into a ball.
And as you were doing that, Mrs. Reed, can you tell me what colour is your soil?
My soil is it's a dark brown, I think.
So dark brown.
Yeah, so my soil is a dark brown. Now, as I'm doing this and I am touching the ball with my fingers, I can tell that actually the texture is quite gritty.
Gritty.
It's quite gritty.
So I'm going to fill that out. Now, whilst you're at home, can you remember what does that mean about the soil if it's a dark brown colour? Just take this time now to pause the video and tell someone at home. Well done if you have remembered that dark brown means that the soil can grow plants quite easily. It is fertile.
Right, the next part of our experiment is to roll the ball between your hands, starting to make a ribbon. If it starts to fall apart,
which I think yours is right now, Mrs.
which
Reed.
mine is, then it means that it has a sandy loam. So I'm just going to leave that in there.
When you were rolling sample 1, Mrs. Reed, to make a ribbon, what sound could you hear?
Well, it sounded quite crunchy.
I'm going to just fill that in. Crunchy.
Sounded quite crunchy.
So we have filled in our table for sample 1. We are now going to follow the same steps for sample 2.
Okay, would you like me to do sample 2?
You can, Mrs. Reed.
I'm just going to change my gloves so I don't get sample 1 mixed up on it actually.
Now at home, if you don't have gloves, you might then want to take this opportunity to go and wash your hands.
Okay, so I've got my gloves on. So I'm not mixing up my samples now, so I've changed my gloves. Okay, so I'm looking at my second one now, my second sample, and actually I think I'm going to have to add a little bit of water to this sample. Just
Before
a little
you
bit.
add the water, Mrs. Reed, what colour would you say your sample 2
Oh,
is?
my colour, I would say this is more of a light brown.
I'm just going to fill that in on the table.
Okay, so I'm just going to put a little bit of water into there. Okay, and then I need to roll this soil into a ball.
And how does that feel, Mrs. Reed, whilst you're doing that, the texture?
The texture of this, I think this is quite sticky.
Sticky.
It's quite sticky. So
It does
I'm
look quite
rolling it into a ball. I think it's very sticky. Very sticky. Okay. Feels quite soft actually as well.
I think like
and
that on there as well.
Okay. So I have rolled it into a ball. I've decided that it feels quite sticky, which means it's probably got some clay in it. Okay, so the next thing I need to do is roll it in my hands to start making a ribbon. It's not rolling very well, but I think that's because it's sticky, but it isn't falling apart.
So if you can create a small ribbon before it falls apart, then the soil is another type of loam. But if you can make a long ribbon, which I think you are right now, Mrs. Reed,
Oh,
then
it's
there
going
is
quite
definitely clay in the soil. And Mrs. Reed has also said that the texture was very sticky. So I definitely think sample 2 has clay. Now, as you were rolling it, what did it sound like? Was there a sound, Mrs. Reed?
The clay itself isn't actually making very much of a sound, so it's quite quiet. There isn't really a sound.
So I'm just going to leave that blank on the sheet. Now we have the last, which is sample 3, and because my gloves are clean, I am happy to do the experiment whilst you fill in the grid.
Okay.
So before I do the ribbon experiment, I'm just going to have a look at this soil, and this soil, in comparison to the other 2 samples, is black. A very,
Ooh,
very
black.
dark browns. I would say even in the sunlight it's black. I'm then going to start rolling the soil into a ball. And as I'm doing that, I'm just going to feel the texture. And again, this soil is very gritty.
Ooh.
I'm just trying to roll this into a ball. And it's actually quite difficult. So I'm just going to add a little bit of water. I don't think it needs a lot. To try and help it stick together. But again,
Oh.
this soil is not even rolling into a ball. So I'm not even going to try and roll it into a ribbon. Now, if you can't roll it into a ribbon and it starts to fall apart like mine, then you have a sandy loam. So this soil definitely contains sand. And the sound, again, very similar to sample 1, is very crunchy.
Very crunchy. Okay.
So did you know, year 1, that the best soil texture for growing plants is loam, which is a mixture of clay, silt and sand. Usually, the more clay and silt in the soil, the more water the soil can hold. This is because the silt and clay are made up of smaller particles than sand. Sandy soil holds lots of air, clay soil holds lots of water but has no room for air. We hope you enjoy taking part in this experiment at home. Remember to send lots of photos in to your class teacher.